So now I want to hear directly from you. I want to hear your aspirations for your own lives, your hopes for your communities and your culture, what you think we can do together in the years to come. All right? Terima kasih banyak. Anita? Good. And I've got my mic here.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. If you may.
Well, I'm going to take the first question, and then I think Anita's going to take a question from social media. Oh, this is tough because we have so many outstanding young people. I'll call on this young lady right here, right in the front. Tell me your name. If you're going to school, tell me what level you're at, what year you are in school, and where you're from.
Hi, Mr. President. My name is Sukim. I'm from Cambodia, and I went to Institute of Foreign Languages, the Royal University of Phnom Penh. And I've got a very simple question for you. What was your dream when you were in your 20s? And did you achieve it? And if so, how did you achieve it?
Well, it's a short question, but it's not a simple one. You know, when I was in high school, so for those of you who don't, are studying under a different system, when I was 15, 16, 17, before I went to the university, I wasn't always the best student. Sometimes I was enjoying life too much. Don't clap. There you are. There. This guy's the same way. No. Part of it I was rebelling. It was, which is natural for young people that age. I didn't know my father, and so my family life was complicated. So I didn't always focus on my studies. And that probably carried over into the first 2 years of university. But around the age of 20, I began to realize that I could have an impact on the world if I applied myself more. I became interested in social policy and government, and I decided that I wanted to work in the nonprofit sector for people who were disadvantaged in the United States. And so I was able to do that for 3 years after I graduated from college. That's how I moved to the city of Chicago. I was hired by a group of churches to work in poor areas to help people get jobs and help improve housing and give young people more opportunity. And that was a great experience for me, and then it led me to go to law school and to practice civil rights law, and then ultimately to run for elected office. And when I think back to my journey, my path, I think the most important thing for me, and maybe the most important thing for all the young people here, is to realize that you really can have an impact on the world. You can achieve your dreams, but in order to do so, you have to focus not so much on a title or how much money you're going to make. You have to focus more on what kind of influence and impact are you going to have on other people's lives. What good can you do in the world? Now, that may involve starting a business, but if you want to start a business, you should be really excited about the product or the service that you're making. It shouldn't just be how much money I can make, because the business people that I meet who do amazing things, like Bill Gates, who started Microsoft, they're usually people who are really interested in what they do, and they really think that it can make a difference in people's lives. If you want to go into government, you shouldn't just want to be a particular government official. You should want to go into government because you think it can help educate some children, or it can help provide jobs for people who need work. So I think the most important thing for me was when I started thinking more about other people and how I could have an impact in my larger society and community and wasn't just thinking about myself. That's when I think your dreams can really take off. Because if you're only thinking about you, then your world is small. If you're thinking about others, then your world gets bigger. Okay? Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. We now have a question from the social media, which we've been collecting over the week.
Okay.
The question comes from our friend Saw Tet Aungkant from Burma, or Myanmar. And he asks, Mr. President, what would be your own keywords or encouragement for each of us, leaders of our next generation, while we are cooperating with numerous diversities, such as different races, languages, beliefs, and cultures, not only in Myanmar, but also across ASEAN?
Good.
Thank you.
Well, it's a great question. If you look at the biggest source of conflict and war and hardship around the world, one of the most, if not the most important reasons is people treating those who are not like them differently, right? So in Myanmar right now, they're going through a transition after decades of repressive government. They're trying to open things up and make the country more democratic, and that's a very courageous process that they're going through. But the danger, now that they're democratizing, is that there are different ethnic groups and different religions inside of Myanmar, and if people start organizing politically around their religious identity or around their ethnic identity as opposed to organizing around principles of justice and rule of law and democracy, then you can actually start seeing conflicts inside those countries that could move Myanmar in a very bad direction. In particular, you've got a Muslim minority inside of Myanmar right now that the broader population has historically looked down upon and whose rights are not fully being protected. Now, that's not unique to Myanmar, right? Here in Malaysia, this is a majority Muslim country. So then there are times where those who are non-Muslims find themselves perhaps being disadvantaged or experiencing hostility. In the United States, obviously, historically, the biggest conflicts arose around race. And we had to fight a civil war, and we had to have a civil rights movement over the course of generations until I could stand before you as a president of African descent. But of course, you know, the job's not done. There's still discrimination and prejudice and ethnic conflict inside the United States that we have to be vigilant against. So my point is, all of us have within us biases and prejudices of people who are not like us or were not raised in the same faith or come from a different ethnic background. But the world is shrinking. It's getting smaller. You could think that way when we were all living separately in villages and tribes and we didn't have contact with each other. We now have the internet and smartphones, and our cultures are all colliding. The world has gotten smaller. And no country is going to succeed if a part of its population is put on the sidelines because they're discriminated against. Malaysia won't succeed if non-Muslims don't have opportunity. Myanmar won't succeed if the Muslim population is oppressed. No society is going to succeed if half your population, meaning women, aren't getting the same education and employment opportunities as men. So I think the key point for all of you, especially as young people, is you should embrace your culture. You should be proud of who you are and your background, and you should appreciate the differences in language and food, and how you worship God is going to be different. And those are things that you should be proud of. But it shouldn't be a tool to look down on somebody else. It shouldn't be a reason to discriminate. And you have to make sure that you are speaking out against that in your daily life, and as you emerge as leaders, you should be on the side of politics that brings people together rather than drives them apart. That is the most important thing for this generation. And part of the way to do that is to be able to stand in other people's shoes and see through their eyes. Almost every religion has within it the basic principle that I, as a Christian, understand from the teachings of Jesus. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Treat people the way you want to be treated. And if you're not doing that, and if society is not respecting that basic principle, then we're going backwards instead of going forward. And this is true all around the world. And sometimes it's among groups that those of us on the outside, they look exactly the same. In Northern Ireland, there has been a raging conflict, although they have finally come to arrive at peace, because half, or a portion of the population is Catholic, a portion is Protestant. Now, from the outside, you look, why are they arguing? They're both Irish, they speak the same language. It seems as if they'd have nothing to argue about. But that's been a part of Ireland that has been held back and is poorer and less developed than the part of Ireland that didn't have that conflict. In Africa, you go to countries, my father's country of Kenya, where oftentimes you've seen tribal conflicts. From the outside, you'd think, what are they arguing about? This is a country that has huge potential. They should be growing, but instead they spend all their time arguing and organizing politically only around tribe and around ethnicity. And then when one gets on top, they're suspicious and they're worried that the other might take advantage of them, and when power shifts, then it's payback. And we see that in society after society. The most important thing young people can do is break out of that mindset. When I was in Korea, I had a chance to, or in Tokyo rather, I had a chance to see an exhibit with an astronaut, a Japanese astronaut who was at the International Space Station, and it was looking at the entire globe, and they're tracking now changing weather patterns, in part because it gives us the ability to respond to disasters quicker. And when you see astronauts from Japan or from the United States or from Russia or others working together, and they're looking down at this planet from a distance, you realize we're all on this little rock in the middle of space. And the differences that seem so important to us from a distance dissolve into nothing. And so we have to have that same perspective, respecting everybody, treating everybody equally under the law. That has to be a principle that all of you uphold. All right? Good. Great question. Let me call on the, I'm going to go boy, girl, so that everybody gets a fair chance. Let's see, hold on. Oh, this gentleman right here. Right there, with the glasses, yeah. There you go.
Hello, Mr. President.
Hello.
My name is Lukman, and I'm from Malaysia. Currently with Yes Alumni Malaysia. Well, I have a question. I wonder what was your first community service project that you did in life, and how did the project impact your community? Thank you so much.
That's a great question. I told you that when I graduated from college, I wanted to work in poor neighborhoods, and so I moved to Chicago, and I worked. This community had gone through some very difficult times. The steel plants there, the steel mills had closed. A lot of manufacturing was moving out of America or becoming technologically obsolete, these old mills. And so these were areas that had been entirely dependent on steel. And as those jobs left, the communities were being abandoned. And there was also racial change in the area. They had been predominantly white, then blacks and Latinos had moved in, and there was fear among the various groups. So they had a lot of problems. I will tell you this, that what I did was I organized a series of meetings, listening to people to find out what they wanted to do something about first. The most immediate problem they saw was there was a lot of crime that had emerged in the area, but they didn't quite know how to do anything about it. So I organized a meeting with the police commander so that they could file their complaints directly to the police commander and try to get more action to create more safe space in those communities for children and to end people standing on street corners, and because it was depressing the whole community. Now, here's the main thing I want to tell you. That first meeting, nobody came. It was a complete failure. And I was very depressed. Because I thought, well, everybody said that they were concerned about crime, but when I organized the meeting, nobody came. And what it made me realize is that if you want to bring about change in a community or in a nation, it's not going to happen overnight. Usually it's very hard to bring about change because people are busy in their daily lives, they have things to do. Some of the things I realized was I hadn't organized the meeting at the right time. It was right around dinner time, and if people were working, they were coming home and picking up their kids, and they couldn't get to the meeting fast enough. And right, so first of all, you've got to try to get people involved, and a lot of people are busy in their own lives, or they don't think it's going to make a difference, or they're scared if they're speaking out against authority. And many of the problems that we're facing, like trying to create jobs or better opportunity, or dealing with poverty, or dealing with the environment, these are problems that have been going on for decades. And so to think that somehow you're going to change it in a day or a week, and then if it doesn't happen, you just give up, well, then you definitely won't succeed. So the most important thing that I learned as a young person trying to bring about change is you have to be persistent. And you have to get more people involved, and you have to form relationships with different groups and different organizations, and you have to listen to people about what they're feeling and what they're concerned about and build trust. And then you have to try to find a small part of the problem and get success on that first, so that maybe from there you can start something else and make it bigger and make it bigger until over time you are really making a difference in your community and in that problem. But you can't be impatient. And the great thing about young people is they're impatient. The biggest problem with young people is they're impatient. Right? It's a strength because it's what makes you want to change things, but sometimes you can be disappointed if change doesn't happen right away, and then you just give up. And you just have to stay with it and learn from your failures as well as your successes. Okay. Anita?
Mr. President, thank
Yeah.
you very much. We have a question from our friend in Singapore. His name is Stanley Ong. He asks, what is the legacy you wish to leave behind?
Well, you know, I've still got 2.5 years left as president, so I hope he's not rushing me. But what is true is that, you know, as President of the United States, you have so many issues coming at you every day. But sometimes I try to step back and think about 20 years from now when I look back, what will I be most proud of, or what do I think will be most important in the work that I've done. Now, my most important legacy is Malia and Sasha, who are turning out to be wonderful young people. So your children, if you're a parent, the most important legacy you have is great children, and I have those who are happy and healthy, and I think they're going to do great things. Another important legacy is being a good husband. So I've tried to do that. That's important. Because if you don't do those things well, then everything else you're going to have some problems with. But I think as president, what I've tried to do in the United States is really focus on how do you create opportunity for all people. And when I first came into office, we were in a huge financial crisis that had hit the entire world, and it was the worst crisis that the United States had had since the 1930s. So the first thing I had to do was just make sure that we stopped the crisis and start allowing the economy to recover, and we've now created more than 9 million jobs, and the economy is beginning to improve for a lot of people. But what you've also seen is a trend in the United States, but also around the world, in which even when the economy grows, it tends to benefit a lot of people at the very top, but the vast majority of people, they don't benefit as much. And you're starting to see bigger and bigger gaps in inequality and in wealth and in opportunity. And that's true not just in the United States, it's true in Europe. It's long been true in parts of Asia. It's been true in Latin America. And I believe that economies work best when growth and development is broad-based, when it's shared. When ordinary people, if they work hard and they take responsibility, they can succeed. Not everybody's going to be rich, but everybody should be able to live a good life. Not everybody's going to be a billionaire, but everybody should be able to have a nice home and educate their children and feel some sense of security. So that's not something that I can do by myself as President of the United States, but everything that I do, whether it's providing more help for people to go to college or giving early childhood education to young children, because we know that the younger children get some additional initial schooling, especially poor children, the better off they'll do in school for all the years to come, to the work that we're trying to do in providing health care for all Americans so that they don't experience a crisis when somebody in their family gets sick. All of those efforts are with the objective of making sure that ordinary people, if they work hard and they act responsibly, they can succeed. And internationally, my main goal has been to work with other partners to promote a system of rules so that conflicts can be resolved peacefully, so that nations observe basic rules of behavior, so that whether you're a big country or a small country, you know that there are certain principles that are observed, that might doesn't just make right, but that there's a set of ideals and that there's justice, both inside countries and between countries. Now, that means trying to end the proliferation of nuclear weapons, which are a threat to humanity. And we've made progress in that front, me negotiating the reduction of our nuclear stockpiles with the Russians, and trying to resolve through diplomacy the problem that Iran has been trying to pursue nuclear weapons, and working with countries like Malaysia to prevent the proliferation of nuclear weapons. That means working to get chemical weapons out of Syria. It means trying to promote a just peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians. It means opening up to Burma. And I was the first president to visit there, and seeing if we could take advantage of the opportunity with Aung San Suu Kyi's release to create a country that was a responsible part of the world order. Now, sometimes our efforts have been successful. Sometimes, just as I told this young man here, my efforts initially haven't been as successful, and I've had to keep on trying. And I am confident that when I'm done as president, there's still going to be parts of the world that are having war, that are having conflict, that are oppressing their own people. So I'm not going to solve all these problems. I've got to leave some work for all of you. But what I do hope is that I will have made progress on each of those fronts. So that, if when I leave I can say, there are a few more countries that are democracies now, and the United States helped. If there are countries where I can say, or areas of the world where I can say, we avoided conflict between two countries because we helped to mediate a dispute, I'll be proud of that. If there are countries where the spotlight has been shined internationally on the oppression of a minority group, and it has forced that country to change its practices, that will be a success. But I don't consider, I don't think I can do that by myself, of course. I can only do that not only with the cooperation and consultation of other leaders, but it's also other citizens of the world. All of you and people in various regions, they've got to want more justice and more peace in order for us to achieve it. Sometimes the United States is viewed as, on the one hand, the cause of everybody's problem, or on the other hand, the United States is expected to solve everybody's problem. And we are a big, powerful nation, and we take our responsibilities very seriously. But we can only do so much. Ultimately, the people in these countries themselves have to partner with us, and because we have problems in our own country that we have to solve. But hopefully, I'm also lifting up certain universal principles and ideals that all of us can embrace and share. All right. It's a woman's turn. It's a young woman's turn. I've got to, let's see who's back here. No, it's a young lady's turn. Okay, this young lady right here. Since the microphone's right there. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, and welcome to Malaysia. So gathering from what you've said, I think it's a shared consensus that youth worldwide can be the catalyst to plant the seeds for an early conditioning on certain global issues, yeah? So my question is, how exactly can America lead us youth internationally in championing such issues? For example, climate change, women empowerment, poverty eradication, particularly to bring the human race together. It appears that a lot of policies are being put in place, but a lot of these policies are being put in place by the Gen X's, or the baby boomers. People like us, the Gen Ys, really don't have a say in these policies, but we are supposed to champion them. So how are we supposed to do all these things?
Well, first of all, I don't. I'm trying to figure out which generation I am. You got baby boomers, then Gen X, and then this is Gen Y. We're on Y. Is Z? Are they here yet, or that's next? Well, first of all, just to be very specific, as I said in my speech, part of the reason that I like to meet with young people is to get their suggestions and their ideas. But then what we try to do is set up a process and a network of young leaders who can share ideas with each other and with us to let us know how they think we can empower you. So coming out of this meeting, there will be mechanisms through social media and in our embassies in each of the 10 ASEAN countries where we're going to be bringing together youth leaders to talk to each other about their plans, what their priorities are, how they think the United States can be most helpful, and we're going to take your suggestions. And let's take the example of something like climate change. The voice of young people on this issue is so important because you are the ones who are going to have to deal with the consequences of this most significantly. I rode with Prime Minister Najib from our press conference to the new Magic Center that's been set up here, an entrepreneurial center that came out of our Global Entrepreneur Summit that was hosted here in Malaysia. And on the ride over, it hadn't started raining yet, but you could tell it was going to be raining soon. And he said that here in Malaysia, you've already seen a change in weather patterns. It used to be that the dry season, the rainy season was very clear. Now, it all just kind of is blurring together. Now, not all of that can be directly attributed precisely to climate change, but when you look at what's been happening all across the country, or all around the world, there's no doubt that weather patterns are changing. It is getting warmer. That is going to have impacts in terms of more flooding, more drought, displacement, could affect food supplies, could affect the incidence of diseases. Coastal communities could be severely affected. And what happens when humans are placed under stress is the likelihood of conflict increases. There's a theory that one of the things that happened in Syria to trigger the protests that resulted in the terrible, violent efforts to suppress them by President Assad was repeated drought in Syria that drove people off their lands. They could no longer afford to make the traditional living that they had made. Now, whether that's true or not, we don't know precisely, but what we do know is that you see in communities that are under severe weather pressure, drought, famine, food prices increasing, they're more likely to be in conflict. And you're going to have to deal with this unless we do something about it. So the question is, well, what can we do? Every country should be coming up with a climate action plan to try to reduce its carbon emissions. In Southeast Asia, one of the most important issues is deforestation. In Indonesia, in Malaysia, what you've seen is huge portions of tropical forests that actually use carbon and so reduce the effects of climate change, reduce carbon being released into the atmosphere and warming the planet. They're just being shredded because of primarily the palm oil industry. And there are large business interests behind that industry. Now, the question is, are we going to, in each of those countries, say, how can we help preserve these forests whilst using a different approach to economic development that does less to damage the atmosphere? And that means engaging then with the various stakeholders. You've got to talk to the businesses involved. You've got to talk to the government, the communities who may be getting jobs, because their first priority is feeding themselves. So if you just say, we've got to stop cutting down the forest, but you don't have an alternative opportunity for people, then they may just ignore you. So there are going to be all kinds of pieces just to that one part of the problem, and each country may have a different element to it. The point, though, is that you have to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. You have to say, this is important. You don't have to be a climate science expert, but you can educate yourselves on the issue. You can discuss it with your peer groups. You can organize young people to interact with international organizations that are already dealing with this issue. You can help to publicize it. You can educate your parents, friends, co-workers, and through that process, you can potentially change policy. So, it will take years. It will not happen next week, but our hope is that through this network that we're going to be developing, that we can be a partner with you in that process. All right? So, I just want to check how much time do we have here? Who's in charge?
We've got time, Mr.
Anina,
President.
we got how much time?
A couple more questions.
Couple more questions. All right, because I just want to make sure that I'm being fair here. All right, it's a guy's turn. Let's see. All right, how about this guy? Because I like his haircut. The guy with the spiky hair, right there. All right.
Yes. Selamat sejahtera, Mr. President. My name is Chong Yap. I'm an event organizer and the curator of TEDx Youth at KL. In your opinion, what are the top 3 advice to fellow Malaysians and government to become a developed country in 6 years' time? As this is one of our country's visions, and I think it's important for fellow Malaysians to contribute together in order to achieve that. Thank you.
Well, I had an extensive conversation with Prime Minister Najib about his development strategy. First of all, Malaysia is now a middle-income country. It's done much better than many other countries in per capita income and growth over the last 2 decades. And there's been some wise leadership that has helped to promote Malaysian exports and helped to train its people. You've got high literacy rates, which is critically important. Investing in people is the single most important thing in a knowledge economy. Right? Traditionally, wealth was defined by land and natural resources. Today, all the most important resources between our ears. And Malaysia's made a good investment in young people. So that continues to be, I think, the most important strategy for growth in the 21st century. And in the United States, my main focus is improving our education system and lifelong learning. Because part of what's changed in the economy, in the 20th century, you got a job at a company, you might stay there for 30 years. Things didn't change that much. Now, you may be at one company and that company may be absorbed and you might have to retrain for a new job because the thing that you were doing before has been made obsolete because of technology. So we have to keep on investing in not only elementary school and secondary school and even universities, but in the United States, for example, we have a system of community colleges and job training where somebody who's in their 30s or even 40s or 50s can go back, get retrained, get more skills, adapt to a new industry, and then be a productive citizen. That's a critical investment that needs to be made. The second thing that I know Prime Minister Najib is focused on, and this applies throughout the region, is if you want to move to the next level of development, then you have to open up an economy to innovation and entrepreneurship. The initial push for growth in Southeast Asia initially started with exporting raw materials and then shifted to manufacturing and light assembly and being part of the global supply chain. And that's all a very important ladder into development. But now, a lot of wealth is being created by new products and new ideas. And at least in the United States, for example, we don't want to just assemble the latest smartphone. We want to invent the latest smartphone. We want to invent the apps and the content for those smartphones. And then, you know, we have an asset that whoever's manufacturing it, some of the value is still flowing to us. Well, what that requires then is changes in the economy to make it more open, to make it more entrepreneurial. Some of the old systems have to be broken down. Now, different countries in ASEAN and different countries around the world are at different stages of development. In some countries, the most important thing for development is just basic rule of law. And something that I said earlier, which is making sure that the law applies to everybody in the same way. I believe if Malaysia is going to take that next leap, then it's going to have to make sure that the economy is one where everybody has the opportunity, regardless of where they started, to succeed. And that energy has to be unleashed. And I think Prime Minister Najib understands that. And you know, the trade agreement that we're trying to create, the TPP, part of what we're trying to do is to create higher standards for labor protection, higher standards for environmental protection, more consistent protection of intellectual property, because increasingly that's the next phase of wealth. All those things require more transparency and more accountability and more rule of law. And I think that it's entirely consistent with Malaysia moving into the next phase. Now, it's hard to change old ways of doing things. And that's true for every country. I mean, China right now, you know, after unprecedented growth over the last 20 years, realizes it's got to change its whole strategy. It's been so export-oriented, but now they're starting to realize that if they want to continue to grow, they've got to develop consumer markets inside their own country. And what that means is that they've got to give workers more ability to spend on consumer goods, and that they have to have a social safety net so that workers aren't just saving all the time, because if they get sick, they don't have any social insurance programs and they don't have any retirement programs. And so they're starting to make these shifts, but these are hard shifts. Even in a country that's controlled by the Central Party, that's not democratic, it's still hard because certain people have gotten accustomed to and done very well with an export-driven strategy. So when you shift, there's going to be somebody who resists. And that's true in every country. It's true in the United States. We've got to change how we do things. And when you try to change, somebody somewhere is benefiting from the status quo. Malaysia is no different. But I'm confident that you can make it happen. All right, I'll take 2 more questions. And it's a young lady's turn. So guys, you can all put down your hands. Let's see. This young lady with the yellow.
Good morning. My name is Rida from Indonesia.
Apa kabar?
Baik-baik saja.
Baik.
Well, okay. I have a very short question. What does happiness mean to you?
What does happiness mean to me? Wow, well, you guys, that's a big philosophical question. Well, I mentioned earlier my family, and it really is true that the older I get, the more, when I think about when I'm on my deathbed, I mean, I don't think about this all the time. I don't want you to think. I'm still fairly young. But when I think at the end of my life and I'm looking back, what will have been most important to me, I think it's the time I will have spent with the people I love. And so that makes me happy. But I also think that as I get older, what's most important to me is feeling as if I've been true to my beliefs and that I've lived with some integrity. Now, that doesn't always make you happy in the sense of you're laughing or, just enjoying life, because sometimes being true to your beliefs is uncomfortable. Sometimes doing things that you think is right may put you in some conflict with somebody. Sometimes people may not appreciate it, and it may be inconvenient. But I think that part of being satisfied, at least with life, as you get older, is feeling as if you know that every day you wake up and there's certain things you believe in, for example, respecting other people or showing kindness to others, or trying to promote justice, or whatever it is that you think is best in you, and that at the end of each day you can say, okay, you know what, I was consistent with what I say I'm about, what I say I believe in, the image I have of myself. And when I'm uncomfortable is when I think, I didn't do my best today. Maybe I didn't speak out when I should have spoken out. Maybe I didn't work as hard on this issue as I should have worked. Then, I'm tossing and turning, and I don't feel good. And I think that having that kind of integrity is important. Where you can look at yourself in the mirror and you can say, okay, I am who I want, who I say I want to be. And nobody's perfect, and everybody's going to make mistakes, but I think if you feel as if you're always striving towards your ideals, then you'll feel okay at the end. All right? Okay. Last question, and it's let's see. No, it's a guy's question. Women, put down your hands. That's the. Okay, I'll call on this gentleman here because he. There you go, with the glasses. All right.
Hello, good evening, Mr. President Obama. Well, my name is Kenny Lee Chiva from Malaysia. I'm an undergrad from University of Malaysia under the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences. So my question is, in your position right now, what values that you uphold the most, that you think is very important, that makes you what you are today? And what do you wish to bring that value to the young people of today so that they can change the world to become a better world? Thank you.
Well, thank you. The I'm gonna take another question after that because I've already answered this question. No, wait. Let me explain. The what I think is most important is showing people respect who you disagree with, right? And so for example, there's a note over there. I don't know what those young people are putting a note about, but I think that the basic idea that if somebody's not like you, if they look differently than you, if they believe differently than you, that you are treating them as you want to be treated. If you are applying those ideas, I think you're going to be halfway there in terms of solving most of the world's problems. And a lot of that's around some of the traditional divisions that we have in our society: race, ethnicity, religion, gender. Treat people with respect, whoever they are, and expect your governments to treat everybody with respect. And if you do that, then you're going to be okay. All right. Last question, young ladies. Now, wait. Everybody put down their hands for a second. Okay, now I've heard from, I've had an Indonesian, a Malaysian, a Cambodian, Myanmar. Thailand didn't get called on. So I think, all right, Thailand's raised, Thailand where? Okay. Oh, and the Philippines. Well, see, I can't call on everybody. Thailand said they were the first ones to shout. So go ahead, this young lady right here.
Hi, Mr. President. Very short question. What are the things that you regret nowadays, like you should have done in the past?
What are the things that I regret? Oh, the list is so long. I regret calling on you because now I'm going to be telling everybody my business. No, I'm just joking about that. I'm now 52, and I still feel pretty good. I'm a little gray-haired. But I will tell you two things I regret. One is very specific, one is more general. The specific thing is I regret not having spent more time with my mother because she died early. She got cancer, and right around when she was my age, actually she was just a year older than I am now, she died. It happened very fast in about 6 months. And I realized that there was a stretch of time from when I was, let's say, 20 until I was 30, where I was so busy with my own life that I didn't always reach out and communicate with her and ask her how she was doing and tell her about things. I was nice, and I'd call and write once in a while. But this goes to what I was saying earlier about what you remember in the end, I think, is the people you love. I realized that I didn't every single day, or at least more often. Just spend time with her and find out what she was thinking and what she was doing, because she had been such an important part of my life. Now that's natural as young people. You know, as you grow up, you become independent. But for those of you, who have not called their parents lately, I would just say that that is something actually I regret. The more general answer is I regret wasting time. You know, when I think when I was young, I spent a lot of time on things that I realize now were not very important. And I wish I had used my time more wisely. And so now I don't want people to spend every minute of every day working all the time, because you have to enjoy life, and you have to have friends, and you have to appreciate all that life has to offer. But I do think that in America at least, but now I think worldwide, we spend an awful lot of time on diversions. You know, watching TV or playing video games, or and all that time, when you add it all up, I say to myself, I could have spent more time learning a foreign language, or I could have spent more time working on a project that was important. And I think it would be useful for all of you to consider how you're spending your time, and make sure that you're making every day count. Let me just say this by way of thank you to all of you. I think you've asked terrific questions. I'm so impressed with all of you and what you have done and what you'll do in the future. I do want you to feel optimistic about your future, even though I told you about some problems like climate change that seem so big now. I always say we get White House interns to come in, and they work at the White House, and they're there for 6 months, and then I usually speak to them at the end of 6 months. And I always tell them that despite how hard sometimes the world seems to be, and all you see on television is war and conflict and poverty and violence, the truth is that if you had to choose when to be born, not knowing where or who you would be, in all of human history, now would be the time. Because the world is less violent, it is healthier, it is wealthier, it is more tolerant, and it offers more opportunity than any time in human history for more people than any time in human history. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't still terrible things happening around the world or in this region, or we still have things like human trafficking, and we still have terrible abuse of children, and there are conflicts, and so there are all kinds of things that we're going to have to tackle and deal with. But you should know that with each successive generation, things have improved just a little bit. And over time, that little bit adds to a lot. And it's now up to you, the next generation, to make sure that 20 years from now or 30 years from now, people look back and say, wow, things are a lot better now than they were back then. And there will still be problems 20 or 30 years from now also, but there'll be different problems because you will have solved many of the problems that exist today. And America wants to be a partner with you in that process. So good luck. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. It's been a wonderful opportunity, and we appreciate it very much.
Thank you, everybody.